Welcome to the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Also on the 670 The Scores YouTube channel. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show, Monday through Friday, 5:30 to 10. Dan Wiederer covers the Bears for the Chicago Tribune. It is, as we speak, Monday evening, the first day of NFL free agency. We expected a flurry of activity, and that's exactly what we got right here in town, Dan. Before we get to the specifics overall, how would you describe Ryan Poles' aggressiveness in the first few hours of free agency?
Well, look, some of that aggressiveness didn't merit, results in some cases. Mike McGlinchey, they get outbid by the Denver Broncos for the right tackle. And I understand what, like you and I talked about a week ago, that patience and discipline and value were going to be a big part of this equation. So in some cases, the aggressiveness was where it needed to be. Where I have questions right now is with everything we've talked about for months in terms of the Bears needing help in the trenches. They still haven't gotten much help in the trenches. Now, again, we are going to hammer this point home on this podcast and for the next couple of weeks. This is all fluid. There's a lot more to come in free agency. There's a lot more to come in the draft, and we can't cast our full judgment until we get to May 3rd and we have a more complete roster. But right now, on Monday, March 13th, 2 of the 3 signings that the Bears have made have been linebackers, middle-tier defensive guys, right? And you've got to figure out how to justify that to some extent with what your next moves are and how you sort of allot the remaining resources you have. Because, look, the Bears had a lot of resources, David, but they get dried up pretty quickly when you make a couple big ticket expenditures like they did on a guard and Nate Davis, and obviously Tremaine Edmunds being the headliner signing to this point, coming over on a 4-year, $72 million deal.
So I agree with you. There was a bit of a surprise, but I also feel like you have to keep reinforcing, number one, everything is fluid. And secondly, you don't necessarily, what was the analogy we used last week? You like the trailer, let's wait and see the movie. Right. I don't know that we can evaluate the movie in the Oscars theme, after, an hour and a half or 45 minutes if it's an hour and 45-minute movie. And we're kind of in the early stages. And the plot looks good. Everything is very appealing right now. A bit of twists along the way because, let's face it, let's get right into it. I did not think they were going to begin to strike agreements or to come to terms with guys who weren't offensive or defensive linemen. I thought that would be the priority now. You mentioned Nate Davis. He blocked for Derrick Henry. He's a right guard in Tennessee. 3 years, $30 million. Why are you laughing? 19.5 guaranteed. That was one of the guys I didn't know that was on the Bears' radar. It just shows you that some of these guys that are valued are kind of under the radar.
The reason I'm laughing, and I'll explain it to you, is that you get this instant reaction. And I had a hit on 670 The Score earlier on Monday, and Dan Bernstein sort of described this initial period as hooray for everything, right? And I think that's a good way to put it because there's a lot of people that they cheer for everything. It was funny in the instant reaction to the Nate Davis signing, how many people were experts on the Tennessee Titans right guard. It always tickles me in free agency where it's, oh, this guy's perfect and that guy wasn't, and it's like, okay, really, okay, we know a lot about Nate Davis. We're going to learn a lot more about Nate Davis and the Bears' vision for him in the days ahead. But that was a situation here, David, where you're talking about you've got Cody Whitehair under contract, you've got Tevin Jenkins under contract. Okay. Now, what are your plans there? Is this a situation where Cody Whitehair could be a cap casualty soon, or a guy that just gets sent by the wayside just because you're clearing space for someone else? Do you have different plans, different visions? We've got to hear all this from Ryan Poles and his coaching staff in the days to come to figure out how all the big pieces of this puzzle, big picture-wise, fit together. We knew that the Bears needed to get Justin help on the offensive line and in the receiving corps. So the 2 biggest additions right now are DJ Moore in the trade on Friday and Nate Davis in the signing on Monday. And then the other 2 big signings, again, are guys that don't rush the passer, that don't necessarily give you a ton of teeth as run stoppers. They're going to be good in that area, like reliable tacklers. But you have to find ways to find difference makers in the most important spots. And I'm just scratching my head a little bit in the early stages at where those guys are going to come from now that you've made a couple of those. Now, look, if they add Draymond Jones, the minute we stop recording this podcast, we say, okay, things look a lot better.
But tomorrow or Thursday or Friday
whenever
or next week. I mean, yeah, so let's slow down and let's go through these one at a time because I think the 3 guys right now that we know are on their way to Chicago are worth exploring how they might fit.
For sure.
The rest of the guys, the hypotheticals are all fun and important to consider. I also want to know, we can maybe discuss as we go through each guy individually, how they arrived at this point because there might have been other guys available. So we'll get to Edmunds. We'll get to Edwards. Let's start with Nate Davis. As you mentioned, we are all in Chicago on the pride of Charlotte because we saw him play in college football every Saturday afternoon. And wait, maybe not. So the guy who is who thought that Nate Davis would be somebody that the Titans would value as much as they have, but he made himself into a player. He's a right guard, Dan. The money isn't necessarily outrageous when you talk about starting offensive linemen, 3 years, $30 million, 19.5 guaranteed. It did make me wonder this. So context, we had heard and thought, and even there was a tweet from ESPN earlier today. Mike McGlinchey was close with the Bears. Right tackle Mike McGlinchey. You wondered right guard Tevin Jenkins. That's a mountain of the right side of the line. How do you think they arrived to Nate Davis? Do you think they pivoted to Davis after not getting McGlinchey, who signed with the Broncos? Well,
you're in free agency. You're always having contingency plans, and you have to remain fluid to what the market's doing. The Bears were definitely in on Mike McGlinchey, and they were willing to pay a high price. Ryan Poles has told us for a while that he has value buckets, and he wants to stay true to those, and he's going to be flexible to an extent. Clearly, they weren't willing to be more flexible in this regard. I think it was, 5 years, $85 million for McGlinchey that the Broncos agreed to pay him, which is a pretty exorbitant price for a right tackle, particularly for if you're the Bears and you're not, as we talked about recently, you're not in splurge and surge mode. You're not trying to make some giant leap in 2023. And so you want to stay disciplined and patient and true to that value bucket. And so then you just scratch that name off the list and you say, okay, now where are we going in our offensive tackle hunt? And so I don't know how active they were at this point on Orlando Brown. I don't know if they made a tangible offer to Jawaan Taylor that was in the range of what he ended up getting, which was a pretty big payday himself. And then Caleb McGarry's the next guy kind of on that offensive tackle list. There was kind of a list of 4 that if you were going to sign an offensive tackle, those were the top shelf guys. We don't know where Caleb McGarry is going to land. So I don't know how all these things connect. I won't pretend to. It's going to be really interesting to get that view from Ryan Poles in the days ahead to figure out how he pivoted. And like David, as well as anyone, that free agency is this weird period because nothing is in order. It's all frenzied. It's all haphazard. There's things happening at multiple positions, at multiple tiers of every position at all times. And it's just a tornado that these general managers have to sit and find a way to be comfortable in. And you just have to figure out your way through your various plans, which you've spent months preparing for and months doing sort of mock free agency trials to figure out how you're going to pivot. And here's where they are right now on March 13th at, as we record this at 5:11 p.m.
So as we sit here on Monday evening, I wonder a couple things about the offensive line decisions or the marketplace. Number one, how close did they come with McGlinchey, who was guaranteed $50 million from the Broncos, and did they use the Bears as leverage? Secondly, Jawaan Taylor ends up going to the Chiefs to play left tackle. He's replacing Orlando Brown Jr. essentially because they must be going younger, or maybe who knows why.
And he got 4 years, $80 million. Am I right on that? Is that the ballpark?
That's a ballpark. I think if I had to double check, I think that it was something that surprised me a little bit from their move. But they know what they're doing because hey, they're the Super Bowl champs. I do wonder this: where's Orlando Brown Jr. now headed? I haven't seen much reporting on that, and I haven't talked to many people who are that aware of it. And is there a second tier of offensive tackle? Because Dan, let's face it, you look at your offensive line, and I don't think it was screaming at you, you need a right guard. You need a right guard. I think that when you talk about what it was screaming at you, that you need an anchor tackle. You need somebody out there, left side, right side, whatever the case may be. And I do wonder this: do you feel like now that they're drafting 9th, are they going to use that position in the draft to identify a tackle, and that makes less of a target or urgent target in free agency?
Well, that's why I say that we have to wait till May 3rd before we cast any final verdicts on what the Bears offseason was or wasn't. Studs chimes in for us here and tells us that Taylor is getting $80 million over 4 years, as we said, and $60 million of that guaranteed, which is a pretty big price to pay. Now, Ryan has been pretty adamant throughout the process of saying, look, we have to make sure that we keep one eye on the draft while we're working through free agency to know that if we want to cut ourselves off at a price point on a certain guy, that we know where our fallback plans are in April. You've got the number 9 pick. You've got guys like Paris Johnson and Peter Skoronski, who will likely be available to you in that range. If you feel good about those guys as a fallback plan, then maybe it helps you have a little bit more relaxation and comfort pushing away from the table on some negotiations that get out beyond your value point. But David, I put out a tweet on Monday afternoon, and it was received poorly by some people in the fan base, but that's a conversation for a different day. But these are the three tackles that you have under contract for 2023 right now: Braxton Jones, Larry Borom, Kellen Diesch. I'm not feeling real comfortable about that, and I would feel some urgency to make sure that there are a couple bodies added to that list before we get to the end of this offseason roster building cycle. And they may, they've got different paths to try to get there. But goodness gracious, between your offensive tackles, your pass rushers, and your interior defensive linemen, when you look at their depth chart, it makes your jaw drop at how far away they are from being legitimate contenders and competitive in those regards. And you better find a way in all your plans to get something that is an upgrade and pushes, in Ryan Poles' words, to move the needle, from E to F. We got a long way to go. Hopefully somewhere along the line, there's some signings that move that needle.
And I think it helps to understand that they have very specific ideas of what players fit at certain positions based on the coaches they have in place, the schemes they brought to Chicago, and where they are in their growth to sustain success. So, for instance, Nate Davis, as experienced as he is blocking for Derrick Henry, he's only 26. So that's a guy who's still ascending in their eyes. Let's go to the linebacker position, because that's the big ticket item of the day so far. And Tremaine Edmunds is somebody that is an athletic freak of nature that is meant to be in the most positive possible way, because he looks like a guy that plays much like Shaq Leonard. Darius Leonard from the Colts with Matt Eberflus. He's a guy that is going to be disruptive. He came out of the draft in 2018, I believe, from Virginia Tech, compared to Brian Urlacher in terms of the athleticism and the ability to play the middle linebacker position. But Dan, I did not expect the Bears to, on the first day of free agency, commit $72 million in a 4-year contract and guarantee 50 to a linebacker, an off-the-ball linebacker, if you will, in Tremaine Edmunds, because I just didn't think that was as high of a priority as some other positions. Certainly the players and the line in front of the linebackers.
And you know why you thought that? Because 4.5 months ago, you realized that the Bears didn't find a way to make things work with an in-house blue chip playmaking, homegrown leader in their locker room in Roquan Smith, who went on to the Baltimore Ravens. The Bears got a second-round pick back, and Roquan ended up signing a $100 million deal with, I think it was 60 guaranteed on that one for 5 years. But they sort of told you in those moments that, look, like, this isn't necessarily a premium position for us at this point, and we're comfortable moving away from Roquan. Well, this traces me back, David, to the discussion that we've had for a few weeks now, where there's been this celebration of the resources the Bears had. And one of the reasons you had those resources, salary cap money to spend, the number 1 pick in the draft, is because you didn't have any players that either won you football games or cost the money that you now have to spend in free agency. And when you go and then, like, if the Bears had only had $70 million to go in to free agency with, but they had Roquan Smith under contract because they extended him last summer, what's the difference? So it's all of a sudden you're plugging a hole that was already plugged when you arrived. And Tremaine Edmunds, for all the speed that he has and for the length that Matt Eberflus is going to tout and moving sideline to sideline and being maybe a better quote unquote fit in his scheme and his defense, he doesn't have the ball production that they said that they valued in linebackers. He doesn't take the ball away. He doesn't have forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, or interceptions, or even sacks. 6.5 career sacks in 5 seasons. And I've spoken to some people that are observers of the Buffalo Bills on a regular basis that said he disappears in big games, and he isn't necessarily the guy that his scouting report says he should be. And the counter argument is, well, he's only 24 and he's going to turn 25 in May. Well, guess what? Roquan Smith's going to turn 26 next month. He's 11 months older than Tremaine Edmunds. So I have a lot of questions about this, because it just feels like, okay, we're going to celebrate the arrival of something that you kind of already had in a better form 8 months ago.
I think what is being celebrated in many circles is that the Bears opted for maybe quantity over quality, because what they have done is they have taken the money that might have been allotted to pay Roquan Smith in 2023, and they've now dispersed it between Tremaine Edmunds, TJ Edwards, and whatever they're going to pay Jack Sanborn on his rookie contract, and that is your 3 linebackers and your 43.
Well, Roquan Smith wouldn't have prohibited you from signing TJ Edwards.
I'm not arguing that, Dan, necessarily. I'm just saying I understand that side of the equation where people are saying that, this is money that they're using to, and you get a second-round draft pick. So for what you were going to commit to Roquan Smith, you get 2 linebackers and a second-round draft pick. And I think that I understand that position, even though it wouldn't be something that I would lead with necessarily, because I do think at some point in time, when you have a player like a Roquan Smith, when you have a player that you drafted and developed and is becoming a star on your watch, I think you keep those guys. I think you pay those guys.
That's the goal.
And that's the idea. When you want to be draft driven, you don't want to be free agent driven. And so that's where I kind of understand there's a lot of rationalizing going on. And I get it because Tremaine.
Hooray for everything.
Yeah, hooray for everything because Tremaine Edmunds, Dan, there's going to be a Sunday. It might be the first one. We're going to watch him and say, wow, because he'll make you say, wow. And then maybe 2 series later, he'll make you say, where are you? Because he does have these tendencies. The inconsistency has been the biggest problem for him, even though he is immensely gifted, talented, and he's going to come here motivated. And Dan, here's the other thing. He's durable, and he's only 24. So again, you're getting guys who are ascending. When Ryan Poles talks about sustaining success, he's identifying guys who are about to hit their peak, about to hit their prime. DJ Moore certainly falls in that category as well. Tremaine Edmunds certainly does too, because he's only 24.
Again, Roquan Smith's only 25. I mean, this is nothing against Tremaine Edmunds. It just feels like you've used resources to fill something that was filled when you arrived. And at some point you have to start building up the areas that matter, which is getting Justin the maximum help, which they've done in the DJ Moore trade. And hopefully Nate Davis comes in here and becomes a reliable starter up front. And you would hope that defensively you walk into OTAs with some legitimate pass rushing threats and some legitimate beasts on the interior defensive line that can help you make those strides in that area. Again, free agency and everything that comes with it makes me uncomfortable because it's like doing a post-game podcast in the middle of the second quarter, right? Because you just don't know how it's all going to sort out. There's a lot more to come, and my tune may be different 3 weeks from now than it is in this moment. I just would like to see them start to add, true difference-making building blocks that they didn't already have. And I just have questions on whether Edmunds is anything that Roquan wasn't.
When I tweeted out that I was surprised, I think it was because all off season long, I was under the assumption, and maybe I created this assumption myself, but the defensive line was the number one priority. And I thought that would be the number one way they go. Maybe they're working on a deal now. We just don't know.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But the thing is that the point that is, I think, well taken is that they are filling, and in doing this, filling a need that they created themselves.
Correct.
So that's part of the thing. And if they chose to go this direction, you respect it because it is his guy now. And I think that's the other thing. You never quite know how far a regime, coach or executive, will go to get their guys in place. And so maybe no matter how much what we may argue that you could defend in a logical football argument, it won't matter if they see something that bothers them about a certain player, or maybe not bothers them, but would like to change. Because you look at the body types of Tremaine Edmunds and you look at Roquan Smith, maybe this is as simple as that. This is a more explosive type player, perhaps, in their mind, and it's their guy. They brought him here. They want to see him succeed.
Well, they'll describe it for us, and we'll get a chance to hear from them, and that's going to be part of the enlightening process that we'll get as we go forward. Obviously, they had another linebacker today, and TJ Edwards, who's a homegrown kid, from Lake Villa. Is that correct?
Yes.
And obviously went on to Wisconsin, is a diehard Chicago Bears fan. Obviously, I think when you talk to people that are familiar with his game with the Eagles, they see a guy who's a reliable tackler, undrafted coming into the league, and then just quickly carved out a spot as a starter and didn't allow the Eagles coaching staff to put him in any role other than being a starter. And when it's all said and done, he's a reliable contributor to a defense that was pretty staunch and played for a Super Bowl in this past season. And so I think you're going to get a guy, David, here where Matt Eberflus is going to fall in love with the instincts. He's going to fall in love with the effort-based mentality that TJ Edwards will bring to the field. And obviously Chicago will fall in love with him because he's one of theirs.
He's already on the score. He's a scorehead. He already did an interview, and he hasn't even signed a contract because he can't do that till Wednesday. I love the kid. I love all the intangibles. When he talked at the Super Bowl, he did an interview with Jarrett Payton on WGN. He talked about growing up idolizing Lance Briggs because he never got enough credit. This is that kind of approach. This is that kind of linebacker. He will do the dirty work and like it. This is the guy that Jack Sanborn would point to and say, I can do that, because they were teammates at Wisconsin. When you look at Edwards not being drafted, he ended up with the Eagles undrafted and made the team, and then he made an impact. So Jack Sanborn, when he's doing what he did last year with the Bears, there was precedent established by TJ Edwards, and now they're teammates, and now they're sharing a linebackers room, which is full of character, because these guys, I think, are football players, and these guys will fit that. I think a lot of linebackers would fall into this category, but they're the ideal guys you want to espouse everything you believe in and establish a culture at Haugh.
No question. And I think it's a really good fit. That one took like 13 minutes after the negotiation window opened to be done. So there was obviously mutual attraction at 11 a.m. And and I know that there were discussions had behind the scenes before 11 a.m. this morning. But TJ Edwards is happy to be coming home, and he's ready to contribute to a defense.
I wouldn't be surprised if TJ Edwards called Ryan Poles. That's how excited he was. Hey, man, it's 5 after 11.
I drew up my own deal. Do you guys like this?
I'm home. Let's meet at the rest stop.
There you go. Yeah, at the Oasis out there by Lake Forest. I want to make this clear, because I have been the guy for a couple weeks saying that I expected Ryan Poles to kind of dip his toe in the water in the outset of free agency, and to not necessarily be going to the top platform and doing the triple Lindy off the top like Rodney Dangerfield and back to school. But so there is that part of things, the discipline, the patience, that the value wave of free agency usually doesn't kick in until the weekend. And so if Ryan goes out and then gets a bunch of guys at team friendly prices with good deals that then fill starter or key backup roles, we could get to next Monday or Tuesday and go, that was awesome. That was awesome to watch him put that together. It's just that's just where we are with this team right now. I just, like this afternoon, I wrote down the guys that were counting on the salary cap, which is the top 51 people on the roster. When you do this exercise and you look at it, you go, oh my God, does this team need a lot, right? Like, I mean, it's mind numbing to get on the 2 deep depth chart and see several names that you don't even know who they are, to be honest with you. And so, they've got a lot of work left to do. It's not all going to get done this week. It's not all going to get done this off season, but it's just a reminder of how steep this climb is going to be.
But we will be here all week if they do make a big move. Check the Twitter account at Take the North Pod, because we will keep updating that with letting you know what our schedule is. You can get this, of course, on the Odyssey app or on YouTube. And we'll just stay on top of it and react as much as everyone else is reacting. We still think they need to get an offensive tackle, perhaps. Still in the market for, I don't think Tremaine Jones, as we sit here talking, has signed with anybody, the Broncos defensive tackle. And we're going to have a lot of opinions because there's going to be a lot more information, which brings us to our producer, Adam Studzinski, Studs, who pulled the overnight shift and did such a good job. He entertained me on my drive in for the Mully and Haugh show. He worked 12 to 5, Studs.
Yesterday was 3 to 5. So when we say yesterday, today's Monday. So it was technically today 3 to 5.
Okay.
And then tomorrow, Tuesday, I'm doing we'll be on midnight to 5 a.m. So if you're hearing this before midnight on Tuesday, before midnight Monday, whatever, before midnight on the 14th, then I'll be on midnight to 5 a.m.
Because Dan and I can be accused sometimes of being grumpy old men or being too serious or whatever. How would you evaluate the first phase, the first wave of free agency? Because like a lot of people, we're just sitting there watching Twitter, talking to people, trying to figure out what's next. What's been your early impression?
So I'll be honest with you. I was a little disappointed in the first few hours as far as, like, I think kind of what you guys were hinting at. They didn't make a move on an offensive tackle or a defensive tackle right away, although, some of the best defensive tackles are still yet to go, Tremaine Jones being one of them.
Yeah.
But when I saw the price for McGlinchey, I'm like, yeah, okay, go ahead, Denver. Because I think that the Bears can get a potentially better player in Paris Johnson at number 9 in the draft anyway. So let me just give you this. I really like the Nate Davis signing, excuse me. I think that helps solidify the interior of your line and starts to make things a little bit clearer. I think you still need to add an offensive tackle at some point if you can in this free agency, so you're not having to rely on a rookie like Paris Johnson. I really like the Tremaine Edwards signing. Excuse me. This is going to happen. for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
Edmunds and Edwards.
Tremaine Edmunds. It's Tremaine Edmunds and TJ Edwards. There. I really like the Tremaine Edmunds signing. A lot of the stuff you guys say is valid about filling a need they created. My counter to that would be, well, they got a second round pick out of it at least. So I think at that point you're getting a guy with a similar skill set and you got a second round pick out of it for cheaper. I'm not saying that Edmunds is better than Roquan, but I think for the way the situation played out, I'm okay with it. I like TJ Edwards a lot. I'm sure we would get along if we ever met. So all in all, like if this is all they get on the first day of free agency, there's still so much to do. I'm preaching patience still, and like you guys have talked about it so much. There's so many holes to fill. At the end of May, if we're sitting here and still pointing out holes that they have to fill, we all said for the entirety of this past season that they're not going to be able to fill all these holes in one off season. So I think we all have to prepare ourselves for them to go into the 2023 season with still glaring weaknesses because they are not going to fill all these in one off season. And I think that's probably over 2 minutes. So I'll go ahead.
Great stuff, Studs.
Have
fun overnights. Adam Studzinski, our producer, also out on the 670 The Score and 670thescore.com, bringing you Bears opinions on a regular basis. All right, Dan, in the final minutes we have left, what do you think is next? And how do you think what's happened so far, what could happen this week? I know we're going to be patient. I know we're going to try to be, deliberate in forming too strong and lasting of opinions because it's so fluid.
Yes.
But how much closer do you think the Bears came, whether it's a trade with DJ Moore or the signings today, to becoming a more respectable team in 2023?
A little bit. A little bit. Look, the DJ Moore acquisition at this point for me is the biggest thing that they have done. And when we get a chance to breathe and talk this out at greater length, remind me to tell you the story of how I learned of the trade of the #1 overall pick, because it goes to a larger point of how these things can happen anywhere, anytime, and really cause quite a bit of chaos in regular life. But that said, to actually have a known quantity coming back in a deal like that, to me, gives me great comfort and great confidence. You've got a proven veteran receiver who can be a go-to guy for Justin Fields, who has shown you what he can be on this level. He's not a tier 1 guy. He's not a Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams type, but he's in that second grouping of receivers in the NFL that now gives you something in your passing game that should help Justin make the ascent that the Bears fans are hoping they can make. And I would much rather have known quantities like DJ Moore than be banking on the 2025 pick in the second round not being Ego Ferguson. You know what I mean? Like, so that's where some of the celebration of like future assets. It's like you don't know who you just traded for. Did you get Anthony Miller? Did you get Ego Ferguson?
Those are great references for any Bears fan paying attention and remembers those names being part of the draft process. Wow.
Because look, like we don't know what any of those picks are going to turn into. Now, like I wrote in a column for ChicagoTribune.com on Monday morning about the historic draft haul that the St. Louis Rams brought in when they traded #2 to the Redskins in the RG3 trade. It didn't become anything. They didn't have any franchise-changing all-pro top-tier guys that changed their franchise, and so it's really easy to dream of best-case scenarios. It's really difficult to say, well, maybe those picks won't turn into anything. And so when you get a guy like DJ Moore, who you know exactly who he is and what he can be, you don't have to play the guessing game on, Justin didn't unlock his true potential. Well, he had his true potential unlocked with Cam Newton and Will Grier and PJ Walker and Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. He's shown that no matter who's throwing him the football, he can produce. And I love that part of the deal because I think that does move the needle more than any of the other moves that they've made to this point.
Excellent points. I also think it accelerates the expectations for Justin Fields. Next year is the No Excuses Tour. That's not meant to be overly critical. That's just
it has to be.
You get him a wide receiver that's a proven guy. You get him an offensive line that protects him, and now it's up to Justin Fields. And I think the Bears are very comfortable with that reality, and everybody should, based on that 5-game middle of the season stretch. And if he can just promise everybody he's going to play that well all 17 games, I think everyone will be fine and dandy. And the other thing before we close, big picture wise, and we'll talk about all the details as we go along here. It's fun to break down a trade the Bears make that is this significant to their franchise. And I think that it's on a short list of the most significant trades ever the Bears have made. But you're talking about investing in the future, not sacrificing it. And I think that's a really big distinction that sets this one apart.
Sure.
You know, whether it's Jay Cutler or
Khalil Mack
or the other ones, it was always like, well, what are you giving up and how much are you sacrificing future drafts or future success? Well, you're not doing that here. This one was quite the opposite. You're using your draft capital to invest in the future and get a player that can help you now and feel very good about later.
Right. And maybe the return on this trade goes to equal the trades that you made when you got rid of John Bostic and Martellus Bennett and Brandon Marshall and Jared Allen. Maybe those historic Bears trades are a benchmark for where this one needs to be set as we go forward for what they got back in return for that.
I love your quick recall of all these obscure Bears. That should be a segment next time.
Obscure. Brandon Marshall, Martellus Bennett, Jared Allen, John Bostic. Those are high-profile Chicago Bears that were traded away, and we don't remember what they got back.
Obscure is definitely the wrong word. I'll come up with the right one next time because we'll have plenty of time to react and to break down the moves. It might be as soon as tomorrow. Who knows? Let's pay attention and keep track of what is going on at the Take the North pod on Twitter. You can tweet at us. You can look for us because we'll be out there if something happens. Anything else, Dan, before we wrap it up?
No, I just want to know if we can coin the No Excuses Tour and use that for the next, I guess it would be 9 or 10 months now to carry us through. Because I would love to go on a No Excuses Tour in 2023.
I would too. Is there any country music involved, though? Because I would like that to be part of the package.
It's your package at this point.
I'm just giving it some thought.
I'm just a promoter.
I like the T-shirt idea, though. All right. For Dan Wiederer, for Adam Studzinski, I'm David Haugh. You can catch us out. You can check us out on your free Odyssey app. You can watch us on the 670 The Score YouTube page. Thank you for joining us. Keep paying attention to what's going on in free agency. We will be here to react and analyze as best we can. This has been the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.